Welcome to the Vibrant Life Show. This show is all about exploring the purposes God has placed in our lives and the passions He's placed in our hearts to reach the community He has placed us in for such a time as this. Whether we're having people on here and hearing their stories, helping you discover your gifts and passions, asking hard questions, or leaning into cultural moments, the goal of this show is to remind us that the life we are created to live is an adventurous one, an authentic one, a meaningful one. We are invited to live the vibrant life. Well, hey everyone, I am your host, Allie Gentry, and welcome back to the Vibrant Life Show. I am so excited to have you with us, whether you're listening on radio, podcast. We're also over on YouTube, if you didn't know that, at the Vibrant Life Show, but we're always so excited to hang out together. And today our conversation is one that is so needed in, I believe, every single person's lives. We all have relationships that need reconciliation. And I think each one of us have to work through this process of forgiveness to even get to that. And to have that conversation that I think is imperative for our lives, especially as believers. This isn't an option. This is something we have to engage. And so I'm excited to have my friend, my coworker, and our worship lead at Renovation Church on the show with us today. Josiah Oslund is in the house. How's it going?
Doing good. In fact, I'm pretty sure I can see my house from out the window behind me.
That's right. You live literally around the corner, and our church is around the corner. So, yeah, I'm so happy that you are here, that you said yes to this show. I would love people to get to know a little about you. So, you want to share a little bit?
Yeah. Born in Kansas, country boy at heart, but for the most part, raised in Arizona, Tucson to the south. The Dirty T. Shout out to my peeps there. Went through high school, spent a few years as a wandering nomad, did a little schooling in Memphis, and ended up back in Arizona 17 years ago.
Wow.
Can you believe just
that.
A mere 17 years ago, you and I were sleeping on an airport floor in Moscow with Matt's wife.
Actually, yeah, our videographer over here, Matt's wife, Joni, we were on a mission trip headed to Armenia, sleeping on a floor in Moscow, 12-hour layover.
That wild. Yeah, and so that was kind of the beginning of my full-time ministry, was that summer 2004, and had the privilege of having the same boss for these last 17 years, and it's been an incredible journey. We
just happen to have the same boss.
We do.
Yeah. Shout out Pastor Kurt, a.k.a. Pastor Dad.
A.k.a. ya boy.
Ya boy, Pastor Kurt. Oh, I love that you're here. And I know that you also, you travel all the time. You and I have that very similarly. You're married to this amazing person that, honestly, I wish that we had time to actually dive into that story of waiting for your person. But Michelle and your little boy, Wyatt.
Yeah, he's just a little nugget. And I never would have said that word before about a baby until I had one, right? Yeah, they're amazing, just adventurous. I know you share that adventurous spirit. I mean, we've shared that together. Yeah. Remember that one time we randomly met in Norway because our paths crossed and got lunch together. So it's a great adventure.
The Vibrant Life truly is an adventurous one. I love that story that we're like, hey, we just happen to be in Norway at the same time, want to grab food. Who does that? Only us. And that's why I'm so grateful that you're on the show, because you also, we share those things together for sure, and the adventure and the zest for life, but also just this deep desire for people to really know Christ. And we've experienced it so deeply in our own lives. And one of the things that I believe you have so much knowledge in because of your story, but also because of the work that you've done in your own life, is about reconciliation. And you're actually one of the voices that I've listened to the most on this conversation, and your family, that I didn't realize the importance of this conversation. So why is reconciliation so important to talk about? And if you don't mind sharing some of your story of how you got there.
Yeah. Well, I think for one, Paul tells us in 2 Corinthians 5, he lays out that the ministry of reconciliation has been given to us. Who's us? These are believers. So every believer has been given the ministry of reconciliation. And in that, modeling what Christ has done in his reconciling work on the cross. And so that's who it's for. It's for any believer. In my own life, it's been quite the adventure. So my dad left home for the first time when I was 12 years old. And over the next couple decades, he was in and out of rehabs, prisons, so on and so forth. And so I was raised effectively, at least my teen years, as, by a single parent. Just mom was the only one in the house. And she was one of those, I think, models of Christ to me. When life got hard, she hit her knees. I don't know how many times I walked in her room and just walked in on her Jesus time as she's just on her knees by her bed. So great testimony there. But, when I'm the oldest child, and I think when my dad left for the first time, I was kind of struggling with these feelings of abandonment, wasn't really able to qualify or quantify what they actually were at the time. But I felt like somehow I had failed because he had left. Maybe if I could have been a better son, maybe if I could have done better grades or something, somehow he wouldn't have had to leave. And maybe that's oldest child syndrome, taking someone else's failures on and making them my own. And I don't know. Also, the mind of a junior high boy can be, I would say, complicated. It seems pretty simple when you look at some things, but that was kind of the reality, I think, of where I was. And as the oldest child, I felt like I needed to be strong for my mom and my siblings, which meant I wasn't going to cry anymore. I wasn't going to be emotionally vulnerable anymore. And so I turned it off and I stopped crying. What I didn't realize in that process is that I also turned off my ability to experience any real joy, like, like Lane talked about last week. And I kind of became this analgesic lump of a junior higher until God grabbed a hold of my heart and during a summer camp and just was like, no, this is not who you are. I'm going to tell you who you are. Mm-hmm. And once he kind of redefined my state of being and I got it, it clicked, that led into what I call my year of healing, and getting into learning playing guitar and kind of backslid somehow into this career now that I've had for the last couple decades. It was never on the radar until it came on the radar, I guess. But so in that process, Dad sometimes was available where we could visit him and talk to him or correspond, via mail. And there were seasons where he just disappeared. And I remember there's 2008, I think it was, there's about 10 months where we just had lost complete contact, could not track him down through any of his friends in Pennsylvania. We didn't know whether he was still in the country, whether he was dead, like what happened. And there was kind of this longing for a little bit of closure on the situation. Had this bright idea to Google his name, at which point I found an arrest record in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. And once you found the county that he was arrested in, I was able to go to inmatefinder.com, which is a real thing.
Didn't know. Now I know.
And I could track down where he was, and we were able to reestablish, communication. And from his perspective, he had felt like we were honestly better off without him in our lives. But there was still something in me that cried out for, no, I still need my dad, right. And so to me, this journey of reconciliation began with forgiveness. And it was my dad's older brother that told me, he said, we were driving through Colorado, I think, and he asked me something along the lines of, it's like, how is this evil that your dad has taken part of? Like, how has this impacted your life? And in me, I was thinking like, evil? That's such a strong word, I'm like, no, he's a good person. He's just made bad decisions. And he's like, no. He's like, you're making excuses for him. He's like, and he's like, until you're able to acknowledge what he's done for what it is, you are not going to be able to forgive him, and you're not going to be able to begin to move forward with this process of reconciliation. And so I think that was the writing on the wall, so to speak.
Right.
And so the next several years, it was not always pretty, but it started with forgiveness. And for me as a teenager, just saying, I forgive you.
Mm-hmm. What would you say is the difference between forgiveness and reconciliation? Don't you feel like people get that confused?
Oh, yeah, I think so, because to me, reconciliation is the further work. It means reconciliation is a restoration of favor. And when you look at Jesus' work of reconciliation on the cross, it's going back to that image of God that was fractured, I think, in all of us, in all of creation. And he, through his work on the cross, and now us, by extension, as little Christs,
right.
as Christians, are bringing this healing, this restoration of favor to the world in social arenas, in creation, in our personal interactions with people. But forgiveness is distinctively different in that it doesn't require the other party to be involved at all. For my dad, he was MIA a lot of that time, but I could still choose to forgive. And forgiveness was, as our pastor has often said, harboring unforgiveness is like lighting yourself on fire and hoping the other person dies from smoke inhalation.
Yeah.
It's forgiveness is for us. And that's the first step in being able to move forward toward reconciliation, which is the ministry, again, that all Christians are called to, not just a select few.
Right.
And then reconciliation, I see that as that requires both parties. And so that's the bringing together, that's the acknowledgement of the wrongs that have been done. It is asking forgiveness potentially face-to-face with that person and working on how do we restore this mutual favor between us.
Yeah, and I think that is a very confusing thing, because I think that a lot of people just want to hurry up and be reconciled with that person. And then when we try to just make that all okay without really working through the steps of forgiveness, I found, I'm not going to put this on everyone else, but when I've tried to do that in past relationships especially, I find that the unforgiveness creates this havoc later on because I was just going so fast to try and be reconciled to that person, because I'm like, I have to reconcile, but we're also called to forgive. And so if I haven't worked through that forgiveness or even asked for forgiveness, but try to just go ahead and reconcile, move on, and kind of like try to compartmentalize and put that, I just have found that it just causes so much havoc later on, because all of a sudden something triggers it and it gets brought up because you never actually worked through forgiveness. But I also feel like it's an ongoing process. Have you seen that in your own life, that's kind of like something you have to continue to work through even with your dad?
Yeah, I would say forgiveness is something, I guess it's kind of like sanctification. Is it an event or is it a process? And it's sometimes yes, because sometimes you forgive them and you mean it with all of your heart, and then a habit cycles or something happens that just suddenly drudges up all these new feelings again. 2006 in October in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, there was a shooting at an Amish schoolhouse. I don't know if you remember that or not, but I remember it rocked the world, and my dad was living in the area at the time, and so, it went on the radar. And what was so powerful about that was some of these Amish community leaders coming up after the fact and publicly forgiving the man who had killed their children. And for them, I think that was a statement that was their first step toward healing. And I think when we try to enter into reconciling, it's the Bob Marley song, let's get together and feel all right. It's like, okay, at surface level, that's not true reconciliation, is not ignoring our differences, is not ignoring the wrongs that have been done. It is choosing to restore connection and community and relationship in that understanding that there has been deep hurt, deep evil done to us.
Right. Right. And if you're just joining us, my name is Allie Gentry. We are on the Vibrant Life Show, and I have Josiah Oslund with me in studio today. And we're talking about reconciliation within our relationships and the difference between forgiveness and reconciliation, but that we're called to do both. And I'm just wondering, too, as we're kind of looking at the obstacles that keep people from doing this, what do you think are some things that people, they know they need to be reconciled to someone? Like, they know that they need to forgive, but they just can't seem to do it. Like they see that scripture in the Bible saying we're called to the ministry of reconciliation, but they can't seem to bring themselves or figure out how to move forward. What do you think that some of those things that keep us from doing it?
Yeah, I think for one, it probably looks like a lot of work, and it's like enough people are busy enough that it's easier to ignore the situation and hope that time will heal all wounds than it is to actually enter into what could be a hard work. It could be maybe it's someone that you haven't had a relationship with for a long time, and God's been nudging, but you're like, but if I reach out and call them, it starts drudging up feelings from the past, and there's this fear of being hurt again or that something's going to spiral out of control. And so I think some of it is intrepidation. I think sometimes we get this maybe chip on our shoulder. They don't deserve it, and it's like they made their bed, they can sleep in it, and it's like this little
guilty. Getting convicted over here. Continue.
It is, but then I think of the model of Jesus. Did he deserve the cross? It was my sin that put him there. And he says, you don't deserve it. He's like, but I willingly lay my life down for your good. And so when we look at the model of Jesus and then continuing on, we, like we said in 2 Corinthians 5, we see Paul that is declaring all Christians have been given this ministry of reconciliation. And so I think step one is forgiveness. You gotta forgive before you can begin to heal and move forward. And then I think another reason that people don't enter into the deeper work of reconciliation is because sometimes you can't. When I was 5 years old, I was molested by a neighbor. And I remember his first name was Jason. I don't remember his last name. And he was whisked away to juvie hall. And it's still a little weird thinking through the events. But it's like I wouldn't know how to go about reconciliation with him. Mm-hmm. Now, I've forgiven him, many times, even when that incident drudged up different feelings through high school and other questions that I kind of asked about my own identity at the time. And it's like, and I could forgive him and I could forgive him. Sometimes reconciliation isn't possible. Maybe that person that you've held a grudge with for years, maybe they're no longer alive, or maybe it was someone that was incredibly abusive verbally or physically in a relationship, and maybe it wouldn't be safe for you to enter into that further work, And so I think there's a lot of reasons that people may shy away from it, but yet the ministry is given to all.
And that's the part that I was going to say, that we don't really have, people are wondering, okay, I'm not really in ministry. Well, if you're a believer, you're in the ministry of reconciliation, because what happened in the garden was it was broken. Relationship was broken between us and God, between us and man, and us and creation. And that's what Jesus came and flipped the script on. Mm-hmm. Like he came and he reconciled and he put that on the cross. And so he flipped that upside down so we can be reconciled to him, reconciled to each other, and he's reconciled creation back to its former glory. And so that is such a huge piece. But here's the deal, is like how you're saying, because I feel like a lot of people would be asking that question, well, what if I can't reconcile with that person? Mm-hmm. And I even had this thought, I've had, a couple of relationships that I've been in, and I romantically, and, you go through really hard, pain, but just because you're reconciling the situation, you can reconcile the situation, reconcile with God, and even reconcile that person, but it doesn't automatically mean that person has to be in your life. So reconciliation doesn't equate that you have to rebuild a full relationship, but sometimes you get to. And it seems like, how did the story with your dad end up in your life with the reconciliation piece? Yeah,
so about probably 5-6 years ago now. Now we, after we'd found him in prison, we reestablished communication through writing and stuff like that. And then when he was released from jail, we began inviting him out. So I'm the eldest of 3 siblings. And so we began inviting him out for Christmas and flying him out for, summer for a week or so just to visit and, get to know his grandkids and that kind of thing. And we just felt like that was something that we were supposed to do as believers. And it created some sweet memories, and that which the enemy had stolen was now being restored to us. And so, and then, after a few times like that, we talked to siblings and prayed for probably 6 months or so about whether or not to invite him out to live, and went ahead and did that. And now for the last 4 years maybe, he's lived with my sister 3 doors down from my mom and her husband, and it's just a beautiful mess. And when we get together, I say it's reconciliation, because it's this restoration of relationship with each other. Yeah, none of us are perfect. And it's not always just a done deal. Sometimes, especially, and I say this because my sister is the one who is the primary caregiver, however you want to say. And so her cycles a little bit more frequently, but nobody is perfect. And once I come to the grip that I have been forgiven for so much, it's a lot easier to extend that grace to others. And I think, in a couple of weeks, we're driving to a car show together in Pine Top again. And we text and chat, and he loves being a granddad and, with our little baby. And so it's just, yeah, life is messy, but it's beautiful in its chaos, I guess.
Yeah, and I love watching your family, because the dynamics are so interesting, because your mom, who is a prayer warrior, shout out to Joy, she had to go through so much forgiveness in this as well, especially, it's a different type of forgiveness, and now she is still there next, few doors down, but also full of grace. And your family has done this ministry of reconciliation in such a beautiful, powerful way. And if you guys want more, you guys actually did a reconciliation panel at our church, which I wasn't thinking of mentioning, but now that you're talking about your family, it's powerful, because your dad, your mom, and your siblings were all up there with you talking about your story and reconciliation. So that's actually, I can link to that in our show notes, because it's a very powerful story in the fullness of it. And I love what you said the other day to me, actually. You said, we can't afford to take grace for granted. And that's like when we've been given it, so we should give it. And that's what I've seen you guys do. And I think that as we're closing, I would love to know anything that you have an encouragement for people who are maybe struggling with this idea, or even justifying other people's failures. Because it seems like, do you feel like people's personalities even play into this? And what if that's them? Because that's how you were. Maybe some insight into that.
Yeah. So I don't know if you've ever heard of Enneagram, but I am. I think I'm a 9, I'm a 9, which is a peacemaker. And so, I realize I may have an unfair advantage, that there's this natural tendency in me to want to resolve confrontation. Now, it may be different from some peacemakers that just want to avoid confrontation. For me, I want to resolve it. I want to get the real tension out of the situation. So I get that. I would say for someone who's just trying to start off, you realize you have a broken relationship in your life. I think it starts with forgiveness. You cannot move forward to what God has called you to be. You cannot live the vibrant life if you don't first start with forgiveness. And that's just letting go of the situation, letting go of the hurt that person has caused you, and being willing to begin healing. And then entering into the ministry of reconciliation that's already given. It's beginning to find ways, establish first, is it safe to contact this person? Am I able to contact this person? Are they still around? And if so, what might that look like for an initial phone call, or whatever, whatever the first step would be. That's where I would start.
Yeah, that's so good. Well, I'm just so grateful that you were on the show. And I just think that this is incredibly important if we want to live the vibrant life, that we have conversations, because unforgiveness will steal joy. And we can't have joy. If you don't have joy, it's hard to live a vibrant life. And if you don't have if you have that broken relationship, it's hard to live fully, because that weighs on you. But you just gave us so much hope into the situation. And I'm just so grateful for your voice and what you've learned, but also the anointing that God has on you for sharing this with us. So Josiah, how can people contact you and connect with you?
Yeah, I've been told I have a face for radio, so this has been a great opportunity. I'm on Instagram at Josiah04. because my last name's too hard to spell. And you can check me out, I guess, on my website. I got a few things too, josiahs.com.
And he wrote a book called A Worship Leader's Handbook by Josiah Oslund that I'll link to as well. It's awesome. I'm grateful for you and who you are in our lives. But yes, thank you. This has been awesome. And everyone, just remember that every day is an invitation to live the vibrant life. Thank you for joining me on the Vibrant Life Show. I would love to connect with you and get to know you. My favorite place to hang out is over on Instagram at ali.gentry or over on Facebook. You can also go to my website, aligentry.com. That's ALIGENTRY.com. Sign up for my newsletter to stay up to date and get links to the show on all platforms after we air, the show's YouTube channel, and really just all the things. I am so honored to get to hang out with you today. My heart is that you remember that each day is an invitation to live the vibrant life.